So yes, it is 100% true. The United States government should stop its attempt to execute Luigi Mangione for the shooting of Brian Thompson, who is not himself a political figure, despite the fact that they're trying to make him into one. And Karen Agnifalo's response on October 16th highlights once again why it is the United States government must drop the attempt to assassinate or kill or execute, however you want to word it, Luigi Mangione in the case of Brian Thompson in New York. Let's get into the details here on the October 16th letter that I'm just getting around to now. It's better late than never. Let's get into this letter now. The devil's in the details. Let's go. Now, on screen is the letter from Agnifalo in Trader. This is Karen Agnifalo. This is the attorney for Luigi Mangione, dated October 16th. And I realize that as this cutting right here of this video, it is the 30th of October. So yes, I'm behind. I'm covering 5 cases. Cut me a little bit of slack. I'm doing the best that I can. But I'm getting around to this letter today. Now, some of this, a lot of times when Karen Agnifalo writes a letter, I want to read every single letter or word that she writes because she's fantastic to read. One of the best attorneys that I have seen as far as reading her arguments. And it drives me nuts, by the way, that she makes such compelling arguments, and yet judges are a little reluctant to act quickly on what seems to be an open and shut case. She makes the most amazing case why the United States government cannot execute Luigi Mangione. She's made it once before, she's making it again. Now, because she's making it again, and because I've done videos about Karen Agnifalo's response to why the United States government can't execute Luigi Mangione, I'm not going to read this whole letter. I'm going to highlight on some new things a little bit that I found in here that I found worthy of note, one of which is enormous. So let's break this down now. Again, I'm going to skip a large portion of this letter because it really is covering the same shit I've already said, which is that the United States government has already prejudiced the entire country against Luigi Mangione. Brian Thompson's not a political figure, and so therefore you can't put the terrorism charge or any kind of attitude that he's a terrorist, which again, in the state case, they dropped the terrorism charges for that very reason, and that's brought up in this letter. If I'm moving kind of fast for you, I apologize. Let me try to break down those things as we get into it. I'm gonna just focus on some major parts. So this letter is to Judge Margaret Garnett. In the case here, the United States District Judge of the Southern District of New York. This is the federal case. Remember, Luigi Mangione is facing 3 jurisdictions, one in Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We're not even going to mess with that today. The state of New York, which recently shot down the idea that first-degree murder in furtherance of an act of terrorism is appropriate. It is not appropriate. Judge Caro said that. And now we've got Karen Agnifalo going after the federal case, saying you need to take off the death penalty part of this case. Luigi Mangione is not deserving of death in this particular case because, again, just killing someone doesn't make you worthy of death. The government doesn't go and execute every single person who murders somebody in New York. They just want Luigi Mangione, and that is inappropriate. And so this letter is going to spell out some new stuff. I'm going to read it from you from the screen right now. We write and reply to the government's October 8th, 2025 letter addressing whether certain social media statements made by the Department of Justice, DOJ personnel, violated Local Criminal Rule 23.1 and the court on the court's April 25th order. Now, let me say again, the local criminal rule 23.1 basically prohibits people who are in official capacities in the government of speaking and basically prejudicing people in a court case saying this person's guilty. That's the summary of what that basically is. And Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, when she went on national TV and said Luigi Mangione is the murderer of Brian Thompson and will be put to death as the murderer who killed an innocent man and father of 2, that was all highly prejudicial and a violation of criminal rule 23.1. Now, the prosecution came back and said, no, it wasn't, and gave their reason. And then Karen Agnifalo said, yes, it was, and gave her reasons. And now comes again another round of this fight. But this one is more brilliantly articulated, and a really, really big piece is going to come out of here. All right. So she's pointing out the history, Karen Agnifalo, again, of this. And she points out the court has already instructed the government could not have, sorry, let me reword this. The court's instruction to the government could not have been clearer. In other words, already once before, Margaret Garnett has issued a warning to the government and to Pam Bondi and to Donald Trump and everybody that's associated to stop fucking doing what you're doing. Pardon my French. I should have had the, I do have the parental warning on there. Thank goodness. Anyways, stop doing what you're doing. What you're doing is illegal and a violation of the 23.1 rule. And so again, Karen Agnifilo is going to remind them the court couldn't have been clearer when it already warned the government to stop doing this shit, and they didn't. So let me read this one more time. On April 25th, the court stated, given the nature of this case, I would like to just remind all this is coming from the court, right? This is the judge. Given the nature of this case, I would like to remind all counsel of the strictures of Local Criminal Rule 23.1 about public commentary about this matter that could impede or affect Mr. Mangione's ability to get a fair trial and the court's ability to select a fair jury in the case. I'm specifically directing the government to convey my directive to Mr. Clayton and request that he convey the same to Attorney General Bondi and any of the subordinates at Main Justice. Now, what's important about this? The judge already has acknowledged they already violated 23.1, the rule. They've already prejudiced a grand jury. They've already prejudiced Mr. Mangione already. And yet she said, essentially in this letter, knock it off. Quit doing that. It is a violation, it is a problem. Already been done, already has been done, but stop doing it, is what the letter said on the 25th. All right. On April 30th, the government informed the court that it had conveyed the court's directive to the Attorney General. So what's that saying? The government, in response to the judge saying, knock this shit off, said, you know what? We told the Attorney General she should knock that shit off. She shouldn't go on national TV prejudicing Luigi Mangione. So we have complied with your request. That statement, let's read in full, is this. The government also writes to inform the court that the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jay Clayton, is recused from this matter. What does that mean? So again, the judge said that called out Mr. Clayton and said, I'm specifically directing the government to convey my directive, the court's directive, to Mr. Clayton and request that he convey to the Attorney General she needs to abide by 23.1. Mr. Clayton was then recused. That means he's fired. He's fired from this case. The government acknowledged that a problem had already happened and fired Jay Clayton from the case. That's the way I interpret that. He's been recused, which means they basically said, you're off of this situation. That's our way of dealing with it. You made a mistake. You already fucked up. That's the key point that people are missing. They already screwed up. They already screwed up, and they're trying to fix it by saying, well, we fired the guy. We recused him. So we made him step down, and we've taken care of Pam Bondi, and we told Pam Bondi, stop doing that shit. That's some history. More history than I was going to give you, but I'm going to get into this more. Pursuant to 28 USC Section 515, Criminal Division Chief Perry Carbone is, I think that's how you pronounce it, is acting as attorney for the United States in this case. Per the court's instruction, the government has notified Mr. Carbone of the court's admonition regarding Local Rule 23.1. Mr. Carbone has conveyed the same to the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, which confirmed that it will in turn notify the Attorney General. So basically what it's saying is we already effed up. We've already violated this rule, but now we're reminding everybody, in God's sake, we fired somebody for doing it. And now we're reminding people, stop doing it. Great. The message has been received. Now, again, let's not forget that the damage has already been done. And that's part of Karen's bitch, is that you already effed this one up. You already did. You already violated the rule. So at least you're taking steps to try to remedy the fact that you screwed up. But here we go. Despite this court's clear directives and assurances made to this court, so now the court's again responding. The judge is responding. Despite this court's clear directives and assurances by you, the government, and the prosecution that was made to this court, the government nevertheless claims that the Department of Justice personnel who publicly commented on the case are Department of Justice employees who are not associated with this matter. This position is factually inaccurate. And inconsistent with the court's instructions explicitly directed at the Attorney General and her subordinates. There can be no doubt that the Attorney General of the United States herself is associated with Mr. Mangione's case, as the Attorney General is the only individual in the Department of Justice that is authorized to seek the death penalty in this case. That is huge. That is huge. So they're saying, yes, Pam Bondi, you are representing the prosecution against Luigi Mangione, and you're not allowed to say he's guilty already before he starts his trial. Moreover, the Attorney General has publicly stated that she herself was involved in this specific case, as she publicly directed the Southern District of New York prosecutors to seek the death penalty against Mr. Mangione in her April 1st, 2025 press release. Now, again, a lot of this, I feel like, as I'm telling you, if you haven't been following this case, you're a little confused. You're going to have to watch some of those previous documents or breakdowns of mine and legal documents, because I spell it out a little bit better. I feel like I'm not doing the best at spelling it out. The best part's coming. That's the thing. I'm just trying to get some preview stuff that you should already know out of the way, because the best part's coming. Moreover, this court itself recognizes the Attorney General's role in this case by ordering the acting United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York to advise the Attorney General to read Local Rule 23.1. So in other words, Karen Agnifilo is saying, look, the court already knows that Pam Bondi violated this thing, because we asked, after Pam Bondi violated 23.1, for the court to remind Pam Bondi about Rule 23.1, and the court then did so. Therefore, Karen Agnifilo is reminding them, by the way, Pam Bondi already violated 23.1, Rule 23.1, which prejudices Luigi Mangione in the eyes of the public and makes him a convicted man before he even starts his trial. They already did that, and you've already acknowledged that Pam Bondi needed to be reminded not to do that. All right. Therefore, not only is the Attorney General the only person in the DOJ authorized to approve the ultimate life or death decision of whether to seek the death penalty, thus making her part of the prosecution team in cases where capital punishment is sought. She is in fact personally made she in fact personally made the decision to execute Mr. Mangione and personally caused the grand jury investigation that led to his indictment. So that's the thing. Pam Bondi said that Luigi Mangione is guilty and we will seek the death penalty against him while a grand jury was being convened about whether or not they should seek the death penalty. It was a huge F up. And all Karen Agnifilo is trying to do is say, for the love of God, you already fucked this up 6 ways from Sunday, so fix it. And how you fix it is you take the death penalty off the table. You done screwed up. You can't seek the death penalty. And it's okay. You could still get life in prison without the possibility of parole, but you need to take the death penalty off the table. And so far, we're still waiting for those cojones to come out and a judge and say, yeah, you screwed up. You done screwed up. You can't have the death penalty. And again, before we get further in this letter, I know you're thinking, why are you defending Mr. Mangione so much? I defend the rule of law. The rule of law is you can't do the shit that you did. This is huge political. This is a political fight. That's all this is. It's a political fight. And when you get into the UnitedHealthCare ties to the United States government coming up in this letter, that's the bombshell. That is the bombshell you need to pay attention to. The United States government's ties to UnitedHealthCare and why they want to execute Luigi Mangione is the bombshell here. Now, because the Attorney General is associated with this case and because the court directed her and her subordinates to be informed of the local rule, it is necessarily the case that her employees are also covered by the local criminal rule 23.1, as they are non-lawyer personnel employed by a lawyer's office and subject to a lawyer's supervision. Point being is that the fact that Pam Bondi had to be reminded not to violate that rule applies to everybody that works for her. So again, that she's just laying down the groundwork. This is where it gets freaking nuts, I believe. All right. So I think this is where it gets nuts. Maybe it's a little further. It's a little further down, but it's going to get nuts. Okay. Unlike any of its predecessors since Watergate's era, the Department of Justice has not acted independently of the White House in this case or in several others. This departure from the longstanding principle of prosecutorial independence has created a blurred and constitutionally troubling line between the Department of Justice and the executive office of the president. As a result, the government cannot credibly contend that statements made by the White House concerning this matter fall outside of the scope of Rule 23.1 or the court's prior order for several reasons. Now, let me explain what's going on here, because again, this is very, very nuanced, and I hope that I could do a decent job of explaining to you what's happening here. 23.1 prohibits people in the prosecution or the Justice Department making prejudicial statements against Luigi Mangione before he's even started this trial. That's the case. The White House, however, is not the judicial system. That's the executive branch. In our government, we have the executive branch, the judicial branch, the legislative branch. The executive branch is not the judicial branch. So they're trying to argue, look, when President Trump says Luigi Mangione is a killer and he shot somebody in the back and he's a cold-blooded murderer and we're going to go after him, Their argument, the prosecution's argument, it was that wasn't prejudicial to Luigi Mangione. The rule 23.1 prohibits the prosecution or the law or the Department of Justice from speaking those kind of words. But the president doesn't fall into that thing because he's the executive branch and he can say whatever the frick he wants to. That was their argument. Karen Agnifilo is going to argue bullshit. The Department of Justice and the White House are inexorably linked. I can't even say that word. They are linked together and can't be separated. And here's how she makes the argument. Now, whether she wins this argument or not, let's put that aside. It's just a really good argument. The big bombshell is still coming. First, here's the argument why you can't separate the executive branch from the Department of Justice. First, the Department of Justice has endorsed White House statements by reposting them. Second, so when Trump makes a statement about Luigi Mangione, the Department of Justice reposts Trump's words. Therefore, again, blurring the lines between the executive branch and the Department of Justice. So Trump can say what he wants, yes, but when the Department of Justice retweets, reposts word for word what the executive branch says, it's making that link between the two of them inseparable. Second, at least one administration employee reports that at least one administration employee reports both to the Attorney General and the White House. The Chief of Staff and Associate Deputy Attorney General for the Deputy Attorney General referenced above, who holds the simultaneous titles of Chief of Staff and Associate Deputy Attorney General for Todd Blanche, at Todd Blanche, under the leadership of Pam Bondi and POTUS, American flag emoji, meaning that he reports directly to both the Attorney General and the White House. So this person reports both to the Attorney General of the Department of Justice and the White House, the executive branch. Therefore, when you've got people who work for both the Department of Justice and the executive branch, you are now blurring the lines between the two. And you can't say, oh, the president's allowed to say something. It's not prejudicial because it wasn't the Justice Department. Again, when you've got people who work and hold titles, both for the executive branch and for the Department of Justice, you have blurred the line. And it's a good argument. Similarly, the president himself has repeatedly referred to himself as the chief law enforcement officer while personally directing individual cases. When the executive branch, the president of the United States, says that he's a law enforcement officer and making decisions on the criminal cases in the United States, he's putting himself in the role of the Justice Department, therefore blurring the lines between the executive branch and the Justice branch, the Department of Justice. So again, if all of this is very, 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 very nuanced, just pay attention that what's happening is bullshit. There you go. At the end of the day, what's happening is bullshit. Now, this is going to have to be settled in courts, so we'll see how this plays out. Third point, the Attorney General's DOJ policy rhetoric emphasizes a political agenda rather than the independent, nonpartisan traditional role of the DOJ. So here's Karen Agnifilo's point. Pam Bondi is making political statements, not Department of Justice statements. A recent Politico article review of the Attorney General's more than 100 public statements. So Politico did a review of what Pam Bondi talks about, and here's what they come up with. Since they've made more than 100 public statements since her appointment, found that she deliberately appears on significantly more right-leaning media outlets. And as the article stated in Politico, she has emerged as perhaps the most openly political and partisan attorney general in modern American history. Political in the sense that she carefully structures her appearances and rhetoric to track the priorities of the White House with no concern for the notions of the Department of Justice's independence. She appears to conceive her role as an advocate for Trump in particular and for the American right more generally. So again, Pam Bondi is acting on behalf of Donald Trump. She even said, I'm directing the Southern District of New York to execute Luigi Mangione on behalf of Donald Trump because Donald Trump wants to be hard on crime and he's directed me to be hard on crime. She literally said in those kind of words, Trump is ordering me to execute Luigi Mangione. So you cannot separate the executive branch from the Justice Department or the Department of Justice when you say the president has ordered me to execute Luigi Mangione or to be hard on crime, so I'm going to execute Luigi Mangione. Again, blurring the lines. Now, is this the big one? All right, here we go. No, this is not the big one, but it is a big one. Recently, Donald Trump has gone out and basically declared war, if you will, against certain types of groups in America, and then lists Luigi Mangione as a political figure when he's not a political figure. And here's how it was done. By issuing the prejudicial statements about Mr. Mangione described above, the Department of Justice and the White House has coordinated to cultivate and disseminate a negative public rhetoric deliberately designed to taint a prospective jury pool. She's flat out, Karen Agnifilo is saying, look, the Department of Justice and Trump are both trying to taint the jury pool and depict Luigi Mangione as a political terrorist. That's what they're trying to do. For example, as recently as September 25th, 2025, the President of the United States issued a National Security Presidential Memorandum, NSPM number 7, right? Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence. That was the title of this document by Donald Trump. Countering domestic terrorism and organized political violence. Domestic terrorism, political violence. And he lists Luigi Mangione as an example. There's no political aspect. Brian Thompson is a CEO of a private insurance company. There's no politics there, except Karen's going to point out where there is politics, because UnitedHealthCare and the United States government are in bed with each other, and therefore it's become political, and that's why they're calling it political. But it should not be political until you start looking at how in bed the UnitedHealthCare company is with the United States government, which we're going to, that's the huge bombshell here. Listen. I say that sometimes. Listen, this is fucking huge. All right. Pardon my French. All right. I get excited. I get mad. I get excited. I start to drop F-bombs. All right. So Trump and his countering domestic terrorism and organized political violence, declaring certain individuals as anti-fascist and designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. Okay, that's already a problem in my opinion, but let's set that aside. How's that to do with Luigi Mangione? Antifa is not Luigi Mangione, right? It's a whole other ball of wax. That's a problem already, what he said, in my opinion. But where's Luigi Mangione come into this? Well, as part of the president's justification for this declaration, he cites 3 cases, including the 2024 assassination of a senior healthcare executive, unquote. Clearly a reference to the allegation against Mr. Mangione. So Donald Trump states the reason why we're going to go after domestic terrorist and political assassinations, and then says there's 3 examples of this. Mr. Mangione shooting Brian Thompson. Have you fucking forgot that Brian Thompson is not a political figure? He's not a government figure. In no way, shape, or form should he be involved with government. It's a private insurance company. It is not a government. It is not a political position. So how do you say that the shooting of Brian Thompson is a political thing? Well, Karen's going to spell it out for you. It shouldn't be a political thing. That's the thing. It shouldn't be, but Karen's going to point it out. All right. This declaration was made despite the fact that only 9 days prior in the New York State Supreme Court, the judge dismissed the terrorism charges against Mr. Mangione, finding that the defendant's conduct did not rise to the level of terrorism, and noted that the federal government also did not charge him with terrorism. The judge held that there was no evidence presented of a desire to terrorize the public, inspire widespread fear, engage in a broader campaign of violence, or to conspire with organized terrorist groups. So, what does that mean? Again, Luigi Mangione is being prosecuted in 3 different jurisdictions. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we're going to put that aside. The state of New York, which charged him with first-degree murder. Luigi Mangione was charged with first-degree murder in the state of New York in furtherance of an act of terrorism. Now, that itself, that first-degree murder charge in furtherance of an act of terrorism, elevated it to a much higher standard, but they don't execute people by death. That's the federal government's role. So they're coming in and they're saying, yeah, we're going to execute them, not for terrorism, but for things related kind of to terrorism. It gets fucking convoluted. But the point being is that the Judge Caro in the state case, said in a monumental decision, you must drop the first-degree murder charge in furtherance of act of terrorism, because there's no terrorism here. That judge said flat out, there is no terrorism in here. And he warned them, using terrorism this way cheapens the word terrorism. Shooting a guy on the street of New York, I don't care who he is, who's not a political figure is not an act of terrorism. You cannot use and cheapen the word terrorism by applying it that way. Karen Agnifilo is reminding the federal government when they're trying to make it sound like Luigi Mangione is a political assassin who just, they literally said domestic terrorists and organized political violence. Political my ass. The judge just said in the state case there's nothing political about this. Mr. Thompson is not a political figure, but yet Trump is going to say that this is a political assassination by Luigi Mangione. Now, moreover, there is no evidence to support any of these claims, nor does Mr. Mangione hold a political or ideological beliefs that are being ascribed to him by the administration. So the administration's making it sound like Luigi Mangione is a political assassin who made a political point, and nowhere has Luigi Mangione ever stated that what happened, if he even did it, which again, let's not forget that he hasn't actually admitted guilt to anything, but he's nowhere is being attributed as saying this was a political assassination. But Trump is going to say it's a political assassination. So unfortunately, there is little reason to believe that the Department of Justice, here's the monster. Let's stop. Whew. This is the monster. This is the key takeaway. This is the one that should just make you piss yourself a little bit if you're a constitutionalist or whatever. This is bothersome in my opinion. Unfortunately, there's little reason to believe that the Department of Justice and the White House will stop their concerted efforts to prejudice Mr. Mangione. Karen is saying, despite what you're doing in this court, despite the court repeatedly telling the government, stop prejudicing the jury against Luigi Mangione by calling him an assassin, guilty of murder of an innocent man and father of two, and a terrorist, stop saying that. But you know what Karen says? Unfortunately, the government's not going to stop doing it. They're going to continue to call Luigi Mangione a terrorist. You know why? Here it is. This is because of UnitedHealthcare's continued attempts to influence this administration. Following the death of its chief executive officer, Brian Thompson, UnitedHealth reportedly lost $63 billion in market value. In May 2025, the Wall Street Journal reported that the UnitedHealth was under criminal investigation related to its Medicare operations. Criminal investigation. UnitedHealthcare, prior to the shooting of Brian Thompson, was under criminal investigation by the Department of Justice. Are you following? They were already under criminal investigation. That company was already under criminal investigation. They lost $63 billion in market value after the shooting of Brian Thompson, and stuff started to come out about the fact that, you know what, they were under investigation by the Department of Justice. And Brian Thompson, along with Andrew Witte, sold off a ton of shares before the public found out they were under investigation by the Department of Justice and cashed out a bunch of shares, which pissed a lot of people off and may have led to him getting shot and killed. Now, wow. There's a lot here, people. There's a lot here. I hope you're reasonably following along. Subsequently, on September 14th, 2025, the Wall Street Journal published an article detailing UnitedHealth's extensive connections with the current administration. Listen, UnitedHealthcare's, this was in, let's repeat it again. The Wall Street Journal published an article detailing UnitedHealthcare's extensive connections to this current administration, the White House, Donald Trump, government. Now, stop. Full stop. Brian Thompson is not a political figure. He's not a government figure. It's a private insurance company. It's a private company. It's not a political figure at all, except Karen's pointing out here's the reason why. Here's the reason why Donald Trump's going to keep calling Luigi Mangione a political terrorist, because the UnitedHealthcare and the government are in bed. They're not supposed to be. They are not supposed to be, but they are in bed. According to that reporting, UnitedHealth obtained meetings with senior officials of the Department of Justice, including Attorney General's chief of staff. The same article stated that UnitedHealth more than doubled its expenditure on lobbying and legal services to $7.7 million in the first half of 2025. UnitedHealthcare is spending money lobbying politicians to basically win favor to try to regain UnitedHealthcare's standing after losing $68 billion over the shooting of their CEO. And so they're spending tons of money influencing politicians to try to, and guess what? When UnitedHealthcare spends money to influence politicians, all of a sudden those politicians want to go after and execute Luigi Mangione as a political terrorist. Huh. Could it be they're being paid to do so? I hope this makes sense to you. I feel like when I'm saying this, even though I know this case, it feels like the back of my hand. I feel like I'm confusing a lot of people. I hope you're following. And that's not to say that I think you're dumb. That's not the case. I actually feel like I'm not conveying it well. That's the case. I'm really, I feel like I'm usually pretty good. I'm usually pretty good at explaining complex things, but I feel like I'm not doing good right now. Maybe my brain's a little foggy, but I just feel like I'm not explaining it as easy as it could be explained. But we'll continue. All right. So I want to repeat that sentence. The same article stated that UnitedHealth more than doubled its expenditure of lobbying and legal services to $7.7 million in the first half of 2025, engaging individuals with direct ties to this administration, including persons identified as among the top donors to the president's super PAC. Literally, money from UnitedHealthCare is going into Donald Trump's super PAC. These lobbyists, several of whom are former Department of Justice employees, reportedly arranged meetings for UnitedHealthCare with senior DOJ officials. The article further recounted that a UnitedHealth chief executive officer met with the White House chief of staff and claimed that they did not discuss the government's investigations into UnitedHealthCare, but rather just other issues. So they're admitting UnitedHealthcare is meeting with the executive branch, Donald Trump's team, after the shooting of Brian Thompson. And what do you know? The government balls deep wants to go after and kill Luigi Mangione as a political terrorist and a horrible person who's done some kind of thing against the government. Why? Because UnitedHealthcare themselves are literally paying to get seated in front of the president and say, this needs to be taken care of. You need to kill that MFer. This is a private civil matter. This is not the government's issue, but it is when you're paying politicians. UnitedHealth's continued financial viability depends upon maintaining the narrative that Mr. Mangione, listen to this, UnitedHealth's continued financial viability depends upon maintaining the narrative that Mr. Mangione, rather than the company or its business practices, is the villain. This is huge. That's a huge sentence. What I've been telling you is that this case is going to put the American healthcare system on trial. The American healthcare system has been abusing Americans for a long time. That's the big issue that's going on. And that may have driven somebody, not necessarily Luigi Mangione, by the way, somebody to shoot and kill the CEO of the healthcare company because they're literally screwing America using AI to try to deny people's claims that they need to have to save their lives. And people are dying because an algorithm tells them that they shouldn't because it's going to make their shareholders more money. That's the big issue. So what does this sentence say again? UnitedHealthcare's continued financial viability depends on them making Mr. Mangione the villain, not their practices, not their business practices. So what are they going to do? They're going to spend all the money they can getting in front of the president saying, Mr. Mangione is the problem in America here, not UnitedHealthcare's predatory practices or the fact that we were under investigation by the Department of Justice. That's not the issue here in America. Not our predatory practices, not the fact that we were under investigation by the Department of Justice, but Mr. Mangione is the problem. And we're going to pay money to get in front of the president and all of his staff to say that Mr. Mangione is the problem in here. And guess what we're saying in America? Mr. Mangione clearly shot this guy and he's a political terrorist and he needs to be put to death. All right. Accordingly, the defense respectfully requests discovery regarding these meetings to determine whether the other issues that were discussed between UnitedHealth and the government precipitated coordinated efforts by the White House and the Department of Justice to malign and prejudice Mr. Mangione. What does that mean? It means Karen Agnifilo is saying, according to you guys, you weren't talking about making Mr. Mangione the villain here. You were talking about other things. So I, Karen Agnifilo, request copies of all correspondence between UnitedHealthCare and the White House and the Department of Justice to prove that those other issues you were talking about wasn't anything to do with Luigi Mangione and making him the villain, because she already knows damn well. Don't ask for something you don't know the answer to. She knows damn well they were talking about executing Luigi Mangione and making him the villain in this case. The administration's consistent and baseless attempts to paint Mr. Mangione as a left-wing extremist, especially during a time of unprecedented political polarization, will have a significant prejudicial effect on conservative-leaning, death-qualified juries who will, as a result, associate him with these viewpoints. Therefore, it is not a stretch to conclude that the administration's attempt to unfairly and inaccurately paint Mr. Mangione as a left-wing violent extremist will have a significant prejudicial effect on this case and his life. Right now, we have the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Donald Trump has associated Luigi Mangione and Tyler Robinson as being one and the same, two peas in a pod. They both killed some political thing. Really? Charlie Kirk, I can understand. Charlie Kirk I can understand being a political figure. Brian Thompson's not supposed to be a political figure. But yet Donald Trump tried to tie Tyler Robinson and what happened to Charlie Kirk to Luigi Mangione and what happened to Brian Thompson, trying to tie them together. Same thing. It's political violence. There's these left-wing violent extremists. Left-wing violent extremists. That's what they're trying to do. So the remedy that's being asked for to conclude this document and to conclude the points, and I'm sorry if I've confused the F out of everybody. As the court is aware, in points 1 and 2 of Mr. Mangione's September 19th motion, we asked the court to dismiss the indictment in light of the prejudicial and unlawful statements of Attorney General and others due to the government in indicting the case while the grand jury prejudice motion was pending before the court. So again, Karen has already made the argument. Pam Bondi's statement that Luigi Mangione is a killer of an innocent man and will be put to death happened while the grand jury was deciding, should we go after the death penalty against Luigi Mangione? Is that appropriate? They were deciding whether or not a death was appropriate while Pam Bondi was telling everyone in America, including those grand jurors who were still being able to hear the news, that yes, indeed, Luigi Mangione needs to be put to death. And so they're like, I guess we do need to put him to death. That was a prejudicial thing. Should have wiped it all out. Karen's made that argument. Hasn't been ruled on yet. And in point 3, we asked the court to dismiss the notion of intent to seek the death penalty. So she's just asking, 1, drop the death penalty and your intention to seek the death penalty entirely. This statement made by DOJ officials since the original motion was filed provide further support for both points 1 and 3. The heart of the defense's concern is that the government has engaged in purposeful, repeated, and unlawful actions, especially designed to hurt Mr. Mangione's chances at a fair trial or a fair proceeding and fair trial, and as part of a wider government effort to further a political agenda. That these same officials, whether acting directly or through their subordinates, have continued on this course, even after this court has explicitly directed them not to do so, and has caused this case to be unlike any prior death penalty case. So again, the court has repeatedly told them to stop doing this, and they continue to do it. And the reason why is they're embedded and they're being paid by UnitedHealthCare to do so, to make Luigi Mangione the villain in America. Counsel cannot find another death penalty case where the trial judge issued a clear and unambiguous order that specified government officials should abide by a critical local rule, ensuring that the trials in the district are not adversely impacted by prejudicial public statements, only to see that order is repeatedly violated and have that violation defended by the government. That's a long sentence. It's a really long sentence. What Karen Agnifilo is saying is, never in history have we seen a court say, stop doing this, and then they continue to do it over and over again. Stop doing it, but we're doing it. Stop doing it. They're still doing it. Never seen that before. And I agree. It's horseshit. They've already violated this rule multiple times, and the court has already warned them to stop doing it multiple times, and yet they continue over and over again. The President of the United States and the Attorney General and the Department of Justice and every underling that works for it continues to repeat the narrative to the American public. Luigi Mangione is a political assassin, a left-wing extremist, a radical, and all these things, which are a violation of 23.1, even after the court has repeatedly told them, stop doing it, and they keep doing it. At this point, Karen says, death is off the table, period. It needs to be off the table. Grow some balls, make the ruling, and make it now. That's the gist of this article. We're going to end there. Thanks for listening to my rant. It went on for 38 minutes, and I feel like I probably confused the living hell out of everyone, but thank you for listening. It was good to get it out of my system. Have a great day.